In this second video in the Boost Your Digitalization series, I want to talk about the business capability area. Interestingly enough, in my experience, many of the people that are not technical or are outside of technology view digitalization still as a technical challenge rather than something else. For me, digitalization is really a fundamental transformation in how we deliver value to customers. And consequently, digitalization is first and foremost a business challenge rather than anything else. Of course, there are other challenges, but it starts with it being a business challenge. And if we then look at the business challenge, we can identify at least three main areas that we have to talk about. The first is the business model, the organization of sales, and the third one is around customer support. And we'll rapidly or briefly go through each of those in a little bit more detail. The business model is concerned with the fact that if we move from a transactional way of delivering value to customers, I sell you the product, you use it for some time, and then you buy the next copy of the product, to a continuous delivery of value to customers. So you get the product from me and I add new and additional value on a continuous basis, then of course I'm looking for ways in which this delivered value can be monetized. There are fundamentally two different ways in which you can do that. The first is you can charge a premium price for the product such that the delivered value over the lifetime of the physical product is captured in that initial major price or a very high price point. So this is typically referred to as premium pricing, but in practice, upfront premium pricing is very often unsustainable for companies. That means that if that doesn't work in your industry, you need to find new business models, which are then typically more of a continuous nature. And these business models are typically based on subscription, they're based on usage, or they're based on performance. And performance means in this case that if I improve your performance in some way, shape, or form, I get some revenue share for that. The second aspect of the business area is the notion of the sales staff. Traditionally, sales staff is very incentives driven and is primarily skilled in transactional sales. They know how to sell the boxes that your products are part of, basically. And in my experience, quite a few digitalization initiatives and innovation initiatives around digitalization that I've studied in the past with the companies that I work with have failed because sales is unable or is unwilling to sell the digital offerings. I mean, typically this is not only driven to skills, but also to incentives. If a salesperson does not make enough revenue from selling services or some form of continuous business model, then they typically will not spend time on it. In my experience, I've seen two types of organizations or organizational approaches that are being pursued. The one is we've seen cases where a company builds a completely parallel organization for anything digital. And in that parallel organization that exists next to their traditional transactional business unit, this parallel digital business unit then also has its own sales organization that then sells its digital offerings. The problem is, of course, that very often you're selling to the same customers, which means that two different salespeople from the same company, but from different business units, go and harass and talk to the same customer. The alternative is that you train existing staff and provide the right incentives to make it worth their while to sell digital offerings and make it actually more worth their while to sell digital offerings than to sell the traditional transactional offerings. The third dimension is customer support. And this is an interesting one that many people ignore, but the interesting thing is that traditional customer support very often had quite a bit of time available to build up competencies around the product right before or right after it had launched, because it would be in market for a long time. And then you can basically use that time to build up a knowledge base so that you can provide effective customer support. However, when you are adopting DevOps, every release only lives for a few weeks. And that means that every release you actually need to update your knowledge base, and the knowledge that is in the knowledge base and that is used by customer support becomes outdated rather quickly. In addition to that, DevOps often is also the starting point for offering things like A/B testing and other forms of customer testing, which further complicate support, because now the customer support does not only need to know which release the customer is on, but also needs to know if any of the customer deployments are involved in any A/B test, and if so, whether this particular customer is receiving or exposed to the A alternative or the B alternative or any of the other alternatives that are available or are currently being tested. So that means that for most companies, customer support actually needs to be reinvented, and especially not just about how do I rapidly build up skills and competence, but also because customer support often is the first point of contact after the initial sales of a physical system. And that means that rather than becoming a cost center, they become very much a part of the sales process, because in customer support, you can actually focus on cross-sell and upsell of additional features, functionality, and other things around the products that the customer already has. So concluding, I think it's important to recognize that digitalization is a business transformation first and foremost. That's where it starts. And in order to be successful in that, you need to focus on at least 3 areas. One is the business models. How do we update the business models? The second is how do we organize sales, and how do we make sure that we have salespeople that want to sell digital offerings, and how is it worth a while to sell digital offerings? And then the third is customer support, both from how do we give adequate customer support in a DevOps context, but also how do we use customer support as part of the sales channel to our customers in order to support cross-sell and upsell. And finally, my experience so far with several of the companies that I work with is that if you do not address the business dimension, this will very likely lead to failure. And with that, thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to discussing the business capability area more with you in the comments or otherwise. Thank you very much.